Welcome to the special called meeting of the Lynchburg City Council for the purpose of conducting our first slate of interviews for school board appointments or reappointments to the vacancies that will exist on June 30th, 2024 in school board districts 1, 2, and 3. Due to the sheer number of qualified candidates, we will keep the interviews to 30 minutes. Candidates, please keep your answers concise, and council members, please be prepared with your questions. I'll call on members in roll call fashion, starting with Councilmember Wilder, who's on his way. Let's limit our questions to one per round with the goal of getting to at least 2 rounds. These interviews today will be conducted in open session, and it's important to remember that this public meeting serves as a way to have open dialogue between candidates and council members. My expectations for audience members are to be mindful of this process while in council chamber, and as always, applause, cheers, or jeers are not permitted. With that, I will ask Ms. Finney to address a few housekeeping items before calling on our first candidate.
Like you mentioned, it is a full day today. We are slated to have interviews back-to-back from 9 a.m. till noon. One of those will be virtual, but everyone else should be in person. We will be finishing the District 1 candidates today, and then at the very end, you all will interview Dr. Gupta from District 3. And that is all I have.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, we will call our first candidate, Mr. Ken Kowalski. Please come forward. Mr. Kowalski, you can go ahead and sit down if you'd like. Pull up to the mic, and if you want to give us a 1 or 2 minute introduction of yourself as to why you think you'd be a qualified candidate for school board, go ahead.
Thank you so much for agreeing to interview me. For the last 45 years, I've been asked by numbers of people to put my name forward and have not chosen to do so until this time. I have a background in public education, both attending, and I was in it for about 12 years back in the 60s and 70s during time of desegregation and time of organizational change. I've always loved the people who were in it, who were good people. We have so many people in education who love kids, they have a gift for teaching, and yet our systems have failed so many of our kids. And I've observed both nationally and here locally how we have so many kids. We have some kids who do great, but I've always said for decades that we have some kids who will come to school and if all you did was beat them with a stick, they do well. But it's what we do with that other 80%. And we have so much trouble around the country. Thank God it's not as bad here as it is in some other places, but we still have so few children who become proficient in all the subject areas. Even some of our people who do become proficient in many areas often come out with very little understanding of history and civics and that kind of thing. So I have a passion for education. I have a background in successful experience as a science teacher and as a high school principal. And I just feel that at this point, I might be helpful to the board as it considers any changes they may want to make to how we do education here in Lynchburg, and I would like to be considered for that opportunity.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Dr. Wilder, I know you just walked in, but if you're ready to go. Yes. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Kowalski, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate you offering your service to our children and our community. We really appreciate that. I served 9 years on the school board. I've been 8 years now on city council. So I'm looking at both sides. I'm familiar with so many great programs the school system has. So share with us what are the major programs you really like in our school system. We're always addressing, various issues from poverty gaps to achievement gaps to SOL learning loss and things of that nature. So we're always looking at programs like that. So what programs do you see that Lynchburg school system has that you really like? And what program would you like to implement or suggest to the schools to help improve some of our test scores?
Okay, and this is where I differ with many. A good program, a good curriculum, a good textbook can be very helpful. A program, a textbook, a curriculum, an initiative, a thrust, a new idea really does not do that much to help a student. What helps a student is to have an individual who has a gift for teaching, who loves kids, who is able to get inside that heart and soul of that young person and get them to recognize the gifts that they have, God-given if you will, and then get them motivated to try to grow into it. And that is what I think we miss. There's so many programs that we have that they're not bad programs and everything, but we miss the very central part of helping a young person realize the potential that they have and become the person that they were created to be. So I would prefer not to say I like these programs, I don't like those programs or anything. I'm just not hung up on programs.
What do you, so I guess your main focus is to, as far as, is in the teaching method of the teachers and training for that, or?
You know, and that's another place where I differ. There's all kinds of training and training systems and programs that the schools of education and continuing education programs that have been tried over the years to try to train teachers or teach teachers how to do it. My experience has been, and my belief is, that you first start with somebody who already has a gift for teaching and who loves kids and wants to do it. And at that point, you try to do everything you can to get bureaucracy out of the way, to get issues of the school and the classroom out of the way that interfere with their working with the kids. And again, I'm not real high on many of the training kinds of things that we've focused so much on. And so there's another place that I differ with some of the status quo.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you, Dr. Kowalski, for your willingness to serve on the LCS School Board. And you did mention in your application that you've had, been concerned about our schools for 60-some years. My question is, what are your greatest concerns, and what steps would you take, or what policies could you support that could help that or change that?
Well, there's a multiple number of ways and fronts that you got to work with to make any significant change in any culture and expected system kind of thing. So I would be supportive of everything we do to increase the support that we have for our good teachers in the sense of disciplinary support. There's no excuse for a child to have bad attitudes, bad behavior, and poor efforts towards achievement. And if students that have those characteristics at that point in their life become disruptive in the school or disruptive in the classroom, it really keeps the teacher from helping the other kids and wastes a lot of people's time. So kids will respond to high expectations. If they think that you're fair, you love them, you can expect an awful lot from them. And the systematic training or program about how to teach everything, one of the things I've discovered, if you talk to an effective teacher or effective principal or whatever, they all have their way of doing something, okay? It's the same principle working with the kids, but each of us has a different way. I might have success in doing this, working with these kids, but I can't teach somebody to do it that way. I can, if they have the basic instincts for it, and if they operate on the correct principles, they're gonna do it differently. It may turn out to be a little less than what I would have done, may turn out to be much greater than what I would have done, but they have to do it their way. They can't do it the way I teach them the way I did. And so there's another place that I kind of differ with the normal course of trying to teach everybody to do pretty much many of the same things.
Thank you.
Councilman Helgeson?
Good morning, Ken. Thank you for being here. Back when you were the principal at EC Glass High School, I had some friends that were your students. And boy, did they speak highly of you, and it came unsolicited. One was Judge Burnett's sister and his brother-in-law, and they said they were there back when you were principal. And what they had also said is, and back at that time, I think there were like 700 or 800 kids per grade. So I appreciate your service, and again, this was unsolicited. They didn't even know you were applying for school board. And once I told them after that, they said, man, he would be good. So how can you work with the school board to help do what we've tried to do for 20 years, is improve education, not just more funding? How do we get better discipline? And
Well, if I were a principal of a school today, there would be a culture that I would work very hard to establish in that school that could be successful for almost every student and every faculty member there and their families. I know that I cannot impose my culture that I would do, like an elementary principal might do, or some, and I don't have any sense that I am coming to the board, if I'm selected to be there, with an idea that I am got the answers to things. What I would like to do is to help the board members. Numbers of them have their own thinking and their own thoughts about what's going on. They have a sense that they want to do something to make a difference. We've gone for decades talking about making a difference, and we've poured money and we've poured programs and we've poured things in, and our achievement results are not better. Our graduation rates are not better. Our percentage of the school-age children in this city that we have in the public schools are not better. And so I think that some people in the board are open to looking at some things somewhat differently, and I believe that I can help them see what they might be able to do with what they already are thinking in their minds, what they want to do. I have no illusions that I'm going to be imposing myself on them, but I think I might be able to be helpful in helping the rest of the board accomplish what they'd like to do, I believe.
great, thank you.
Councilman Missions?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Thank you for being here. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit of a different direction here. I guess the question that I have is, how would you plan to harness our industries around here? When I say our industries, I specifically say our major employers like our nuclear technology companies, metal fabrication, things like that, things that are critical to our local economy, as a partnership to try to, one, get kids great educations, and then two, get kids great jobs when they come out of school.
Well, it's interesting you should ask that, Marty. When I came here and when I was principal up in Alexander before that, I was actually more involved in what we should do to help those who maybe not be going to college, those who maybe have all the attributes of being going to college but probably don't want to be an academician and go. And one of the things I can tell you, when we first came, I was delighted when I came here that they had somebody made a mistake and got a federal project for a job placement director at the high school, okay? They didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know what they had because they accidentally hired a very unique person. And we got a lot of criticism because he wasn't in the office much and everything, but we had a situation where we were out and working with industry and everything to help both place students coming out, former students, dropouts, graduates, and there were 12 projects in Virginia. The project at EC Glass had all the metrics they were measured by exceeded the total of the other 11. We were having such success. We at one point were outplacing the Virginia Employment Commission, and I am a strong believer in having our schools work closely with both the students who have the abilities and inclinations to go there, and with working with what is industry looking for. So that's a strong suit for me.
Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Yes, sir. Good to see you again, sir.
Thank you.
What will you do on the school board to try to stop the daycare center? We are operating a big daycare center instead of an institution of learning. How would you try to put that back into the, raising of the children back into the hands of the parents and not the school system.
I may not understand that question completely. Did I hear you use the term daycare center?
Yes, sir.
For a specific thing we're doing and may be doing, I'm familiar with some things that are going on in the elementary schools because we're in the Kiwanis Club of Lynchburg, and my wife and I are in several of the elementary schools with terrific kids programs, but I'm not familiar with all that's going on there. And I would not jump to any quick conclusion about what to do with some of the programs we have in there until I can see more clearly what is happening and what we've been doing and why. As a general principle, I think we try to provide, we take a lot of pride. When I first came to town here, they took such pride that they had the lowest price type A lunch in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Well, 2/3 of that lunch went in the trash cans every day because it was awful. So it done good, it does not do, and very few people participated. So I don't know exactly what's going on with that program, but I would look at any program, and I think any program that we just try to offer because it's something that's helpful and it's nice and this sort of thing, but it interferes with the primary purpose of teaching kids how to read, write, know their history, understand science, understand who they are, the nature of man. All the things that detract from that, I would question.
Thank you, sir.
Vice Mayor Feraldi?
Good morning. My question is, you had mentioned over the years some folks had requested you put a application forward for the school board. Who are some of those folks?
I think I missed the first part of your question. Who are the people I've talked to?
Who are the folks who have asked you to put your application in?
Really, no one asked me to put the application this year. The last person to ask me to put in my application with the school board was Scott Brabrand, who was the previous superintendent here. First 20, 30 years after I left the schools, I had numbers of people asking that, but no one asked me this time. I just had this sense emerge that I should consider at this point something I would never have considered before in doing. And so it was my own sense that first got me there. And I spoke to family and spoke to some friends and decided, and actually I wound up sitting on it and praying about it and did not turn in my name until the last day really that it could be turned in.
Is that the same Scott Brabrand who went to Fairfax County?
The one that came from Fairfax County came down here and screwed things up and went back to Fairfax County and didn't do all that well up there. Yes.
So if I may follow up on the question then, and I do say this with a bit of a smile. So if you have that assessment of Scott Brabrand and how he ran the school divisions, why should we give any credence to him asking you to put your application in at that time?
I didn't ask you to have credence in it. I just said he was the last person that actually asked me to do that.
And that's a fair response.
Pardon?
And that's a fair response.
Well, and from that point, it's all been on my own. And I told Scott why I wouldn't go on, because I would be frustrated on the board and I would be his biggest pain.
Was he superintendent?
And that wasn't fair to him and it wasn't fair to the board.
This will be my final question, I'm sorry. Was he superintendent at the time when he asked you to?
Yeah, the first couple of years he was here, I met with him several times each year for lunch and tried to ascertain that he could make some really positive improvements kind of thing. And after a couple of years, I gave up.
Thank you, Mr. Kowalski.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am fine, thank you.
Good. I haven't had a chance to meet you yet, so glad to meet you this morning. So I'm going to venture to guess that the school board that existed when you were principal versus the way school boards are now are vastly different. The way that the things that they have to consider these days versus the school boards back when you were a principal which I would hope were more focused on what they should have been, which is really the education of our children. And if you pay attention, which I know you do, to the news today and what our specific school board deals with more than I wish they had to, are really more political issues and less about education. That's become common across our country. Politics in the classroom, and then it's coming into the school board meetings. And school boards are having to vote on really political issues versus things that really have to do with educating our children, which is what I wish that were doing more of. Here in our city, our school board in the last few weeks had to vote on transgender policy, Governor Youngkin's transgender policy, which is very, more extensive than what I'm going to offer to you now, but in a very watered down version. It was about boys and girls in bathrooms and in changing rooms in the high schools or in the schools in general. And so if boys or girls that are identifying as transgender should be allowed to use the bathrooms that they are now identifying with. So if a boy now is saying that he feels like he's a girl, can he use the girls' bathroom and vice versa? What the school board voted on was that whatever's on your birth certificate is the bathroom that you should use. It's been a controversial issue in several school boards around the country. It was controversial here for people that didn't support that vote. We have people that come to our council meetings that are very passionate and vocal about where they sit on issues on both sides of the aisle, and people come to school board meetings that are passionate on both sides of issues. And you get a lot of angry emails and calls from people when you have to make votes like that. And it can affect your family and your going to the
painfully
store.
aware of that.
Yes, yes. So you have to be comfortable as a school board member, as we have to be in this day and age with decisions like that, knowing that that's kind of the world we live in now. Where would you have sat on that issue had you had to make that vote?
Well, all my life, whether it's in the schools or in churches or other organizations I've been in, I've felt that speaking the truth and common sense should prevail over ideology and other political points of view and this sort of thing. On the particular case, the school board, I thought, was thoughtful and correct because what they did, I understand, okay, is they adopted essentially the policies that were suggested by our governor, and I think those are reasonable. I think that if you can not open up women's locker rooms and bathrooms and everything to, quote, males trying to trans over, you can not open those up that way without dissing the people who are legitimately perhaps trying to trans. And other accommodations can be made. Many schools have an individual bathroom for either staff or family or something else something that can be made available if the person is uncomfortable, in this case in the mailroom. There are other accommodations that can be made without having to open up everything in a way that doesn't make any common sense. And of course, there's as many people, if not a lot more people, who would disagree that just because you identify as a woman, you are one, or because you identify as a man, that you are one. There would be a lot of disagreement on those who say that is true, okay? So short answer is I would have voted the same way the board did on that.
Okay, thank you. And the point of asking that is just, the comfort level of being willing to vote on those types of issues, understanding that, kind of what comes with those types of political votes, and being comfortable in public, in the public spotlight, obviously now with the school boards being so open to those types of issues. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you. Again, thank you again. We appreciate it. Given the current climate, as Mayor Conlon just referring to like a lot of political climate, things of that nature. We've had some challenges with our relation with the school board, between school board and city council over the past several years. It's gotten a little more challenging. What will you bring to the table to bring more unity to that situation with the school board and city council?
Well, as much as I've been a disruptor to the status quo in any situation in the schools, including the school boards at the time, in the sense of disrupting thinking that people habitually have gone into kind of thing, if you go back and examine my record in Alexandria, my record here, I wind up actually unifying the vast majority of people in the efforts that we're making and the success that we're having. So, I have no problem taking slings and arrows, and I've always welcomed those who disagree with me, and I've always encouraged people who disagree with anything I've said or done to challenge it, because in many cases I still think I was correct, and they may come to think that. But I have, in those challenges, I have learned, and I have made changes because I learned something I didn't know. So I'm open to those kinds of things, but I'm not afraid of having people being upset with something I'm saying, because normally I'm saying something that adheres to certain basic principles. It adheres to the idea of truth, common sense, and so I really, I seldom find myself in a position where I'm uncomfortable with dissent.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you. What are your top 3 priorities as a school board member? What are the top 3 things you'd like to focus on?
Well, I don't come in with an agenda, okay, of the top 3 things I'm working. I do have some thoughts for the board concerning. One is just generally how we operate as a board. My sense is that school boards get bogged down in the minutia of operations with meetings, committee meetings, other meetings, agendas put together, a lot of things to deal with. They seldom get a chance to really go out and spend enough time in the schools to have a feel for the kids, the parents, the staff, over some period of time, to have a feel for what's really going on, what's working and what's not working. And so among the things that I would probably suggest to the board is that they consider maybe minimizing the amount of bureaucratic time they take up sitting in chambers, and they take a lot of the hours that they commit each month to the school board function and preparation, and commit that time to being in the schools. And again, it takes getting used to it. You wouldn't see the things you want to see right away, but over time, you could have a much more knowledgeable board who could make much better decisions as a board about what's going on with the schools if we did that. So one of the things that I would propose or suggest to them would be some form of that kind of change in the board operation. And I think a lot of other things would flow from that. I don't have, and if they don't want to do it, I'm certainly not going to try to force it.
Thank you.
I just said one thing that I really appreciate what you had said, is how do you improve education, is set high expectations for the students and love them, and they will respond. Thank you.
There's no excuse for bad attitudes, bad behavior, and poor efforts towards achievement. And kids will respond to our expecting that, because when I was in the schools, I wanted no child to fail. I was not going to let them fail if I could possibly do it. But in order to do that, you have to have some tough love.
Well, Dr.
And
Kowalski?
let me say one more thing, is just because some kids come from some difficult situations at home or in the neighborhood or whatever, they may come from some difficult situations and have a lot to cope with and a lot to deal with, does not mean that we should reduce the expectations we have for them and our efforts to help them achieve, because any of them can achieve coming out of that. And I don't know if it's still there, but I was disappointed a couple of years ago. I looked at the board documents, the school board documents, and I found they had a section in there where they showed the expected standards for proficiency in various subject areas, and they broke it down by race. And their goal was about 85% proficiency in all the subject areas for all races except blacks. And that was lower. And I said, that's inexcusable. Yeah, I don't know if it's still there. I haven't looked at it lately, but it was there a couple of years ago when I looked. The tyranny of low expectations is among the things we have. And let me just reiterate, we've got a lot of great people in the schools. We got people who are trying very hard. They love their schools, love their kids. But we're not doing something right when half the kids cannot become proficient in reading and 2/3 can't become proficient in math, and barely 15% can become proficient in history. We're not doing something right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kowalski. Our time is up, and we appreciate you being here this morning. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and a happy belated Father's
Thank you.
Day to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next candidate is Joseph Malloy. Good morning, Mr. Malloy. How are you?
Good morning, Mayor Reed.
If you would like to take a minute or two to introduce yourself and tell us why you think we should consider you for candidate for school board.
Thank you very much. As I was able to briefly mention, I guess it's almost 3 weeks ago at the city council meeting, I'm an engineer by training. I don't have an education degree or work experience in Lynchburg City Schools. Spent most of the last 40 years either in active duty Navy or working for Framatome and then BWXT, where I was spent the last 25 years prior to retiring on December 31st. So as I say, it's not an exact cut and paste to provide that same level of skill set into the Lynchburg City Schools. I would mention that I was a manager for the last 20 of the 25 years I was at BWXT. I'm familiar with establishing budgets, negotiating budgets, having to defend a budget request against some very tough questions that drill down into details, winning and losing some budgetary negotiating battles, and then submitting to the discipline of an approved budget. In my world that I worked in, I would say we were very effective at communicating. We often had to work our way through difficult issues with our supervising body, which were the designing laboratories, and we both reported to Naval Reactors. So it was not unusual for us to have to take tough positions and defend them, sometimes be pushed in certain directions. So that's one of the things I would bring to the table. Beyond that, I think one of the stronger ones that I bring is that I have familiarity with Lynchburg City Schools, and that my wife had worked in Lynchburg City Schools and Bedford County Schools. My wife, Kathleen, she does have the education degree and the master's in counseling. Worked in elementary, middle, and high schools. Her last couple of years were working in EC Glass for CVCC to develop their programs for post-secondary education that was not directly to 4 years. So I'm not completely coming in blind, and one of the main things I tried to get across 3 weeks ago was my 3 children went through Lynchburg City Schools, elementary up through EC Glass, and they really got a first-class education. And I'll reiterate, that leaves me with a large debt to Lynchburg City Schools. And as I heard you touch on with the last candidate, being a little bit more in the public eye is not all peaches and cream, and I do understand that. But as I said, I've been retired for the last 6 months. Vacation phase is wonderful, but I have more to give, and I owe this to Lynchburg City and Lynchburg City Schools. When my children graduated and when they went through, as I said, they received an excellent education. Certain things have changed. Many things have not, all through this century is my extent of my experience with Lynchburg City Schools. All of the state of Virginia, not just Lynchburg City, is facing declining enrollment for a lot of reasons. That's one of the challenges I know that has driven some of the tough choices and tough discussions that Lynchburg City Schools have had to deal with. We have 11 terrific elementary schools, 3 terrific middle schools, 2 terrific high schools. But numbers don't lie, and there are several things we can do. None of them are easy to address those challenges. My vision for Lynchburg City Schools, we've had various programs for magnet and gifted opportunity throughout Darrington, R.S. Payne, Dunbar. My vision, and a vision can be as high as I want it to be because it's a vision, my target would be that Lynchburg City Schools itself would be the targets, the magnet school system, that someone relocating or deciding where they were going to send their children would be Lynchburg City Schools first, rather than surrounding counties. That ought to be the goal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Dr. Wilder?
Again, thank you for your willingness to serve our school board. Really appreciate that you coming in today.
Thanks, sir.
Question, our school system, being an urban school setting, they have several programs for diversity of students from the high learners to more challenging learners to just a variety of programs. Which programs do you feel that are most impactful in our school system? And then considering we have some more challenges in our SOO scores and our achievement gap scores, what would you like to see implemented more in our school system to address that?
One program that is not Lynchburg City specific, it's actually Virginia specific, is a statewide initiative for grades 3 through 8 for increased levels of tutoring. And I think that's terrific. I'm not particularly familiar with how deeply that's penetrated into Lynchburg City Schools. I stumbled on that when I was trying to find out what the Lord had planned for me in retirement, because I think I've done some tutoring, particularly in math. My initial reaction to that was 3 through 8 is not early enough. And one philosophy that I would bring if I am selected to the Lynchburg City School Board, and I hate to rob Peter to pay Paul, but the earlier the better to make improvements is vital. What we can do for K through 3, for making sure kids get to 3rd grade being absolutely proficient in reading, an ounce of sweat put into that is worth a pound of sweat in high school. And if that is in any way harsh, I'm sorry, but I'm a strong believer in that. The earlier the better. I'll try and make a very long story short. My oldest got his math degree from Virginia Tech. He initially worked coordinating as a franchise operator for a mathnasium. And my very young son went to being a very old man very quickly, learning about teaching children and hiring teachers for that tutoring. And he became adamant about how critical it was to teach them the math basics first before even a good performing student gets blindsided by algebra. That's a long story, but my primary focus in terms of grades is elementary. Elementary we have to get right first.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mallory. Thank you for your willingness to serve on the Lynchburg City School Board. In your application, you stated that you would, if appointed, would prioritize the mission of educating students. And what does that look like to you, and what policies would you want to see in place to do that?
As was alluded to in the last interview, forgive me for eavesdropping on that one, but in our modern world, we do see some encroachment on the mission of Lynchburg City Schools by outside political motivations, some of which are driven by maximizing and improving the kids' education, some of which not so much. Reading, writing, and arithmetic, a little bit simplistic, obviously. They're going to need more than that in high school, but any initiative that will require time out of the very limited 180 days that we have with our children to teach them that has to be evaluated against that lens. I do want to teach good citizenship. I do want to teach respect for differences. I absolutely want to teach good behavior, but I think those should be woven into the normal culture of the school. And if we lead with that, that can detract from the everyday philosophy of we're here to learn the subject at hand. And I am anxious to find as much common ground as possible, but to keep non-academic centered discussions, at least outside of the classroom phase. We can use the schools for many things outside of classroom time. The classroom time should be classroom time.
Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
And reading your application, you know, as I'm reading it, managing engineers. Engineers aren't the easiest group to manage, so thank you for that. So that already's got a pretty good, and then you also mentioned that you don't have a degree in education, which is, I think, a very fabulous thing. Because, you know, lots of times we talk about diversity. Sadly, so many times there's all the same thinking. Having a different opinion is fantastic. The last thing, which leads to my question, is with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of my favorite books as well. So describe for me, with one of the habits, to begin with the end in mind, of what you would see on your journey to improve education in Lynchburg.
Thank you.
As a school board member.
To my mind, that's number one of the 7 in many ways. The end, and again, because it's the end, I can set an unrealistically high goal there, but the goal is 100% graduation rate, 100% attendance, and 100% of our graduates having a constructive plan when they graduate. I'm extremely fortunate, and this is the most partisan thing I'll say. I'm a Hokie, and all 3 of my children are Hokies. So that's a wonderful, terrific outcome. It's not for everyone, meaning a 4-year degree in whatever. Again, when my wife was the math and science teacher for the Laurel program, and again, when she was working for CVCC to develop a postgraduate plan for the non-4-year degrees, I was surprised how much room there is for improvement in our emphasis for outcomes beyond a 4-year degree, how many trade opportunities there are, work opportunities that require some or more non-4-year degree training, and how discouraging it was that there's very little effort made on, I don't know who to blame, or I don't care who to blame, to make sure students are aware of this early on in the high school phase or earlier. The idea of being well prepared for a skilled trade as being inferior to a 4-year degree is anathema to me. Again, I worked for BWXT for 25 years, where we had desperate need of skilled machinists, welders, quality inspectors. And I'll tell you, one of the worst chewing outs I ever got in my 25 years was from a unit manager of the machine shop, who, when I asked him on behalf of my wife what advice could I give her about post-secondary opportunities, he berated me about how well Danville Community College in that area prepares versus CVCC and the rest of us here. I was trembling in my boots since I was one level below me as a manager, but he knew what he was talking about, and I walked away from that with a much greater appreciation. The education complex here in Lynchburg City Schools has opportunities to improve in that, to give our population other opportunities than we've been preparing them for.
Great. Thank you.
Pardon the filibuster.
Councilman Mitchell.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
Very well, sir, thank you.
Good.
I hope you are too.
I am. I'm just thankful that you're here, and I'm thankful that you put your name in the hat. I appreciate you stepping up and having a willingness to serve, because it's a huge thing.
I appreciate that, sir.
It's a huge thing, so I appreciate that. Charter schools, can you tell me your position on charter schools?
I am here interviewing for a position for Lynchburg City Schools. Charter schools are absolutely not the enemy. In some respects, charter schools are the competition. Competition, as many bruises as it may give us at times, is good, not a bad thing. To the maximum extent possible, Lynchburg City Schools can only benefit from cooperating with those parts of our community that are not enrolled in Lynchburg City Schools, whether it be via a potential charter school, numerous folks in the homeschooling community. I know that we have several large some large and some not so large private schools in the area, which can be excellent. As an example, when my kids ran cross-country in middle school, they ran against the Peaksview Pacers, the group of homeschooled children who still wanted to have some type of activity. I think that was terrific. I was never a great fan of what has been called in certain states the Tim Tebow law, to allow any homeschooled person to join in the after-school activities of the Lynchburg, or of a public school. A public school is a commitment, and as I say, we would, in my vision, cooperate as much as possible, but realize that we are competing for students, and the existence of charter schools indicates that we can improve. I hope I didn't dodge the question. Is that enough detail?
No,
or-
you didn't dodge the question, but thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Taylor?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Very well, thank you, sir.
Right. Praise God.
Thank you.
I visited several schools, and on one occasion, I saw a teacher standing up by the blackboard, used to be blackboards, whiteboard, whatever now,
CV screen.
instructing. This is a real board. He was there, like old school. He was there instructing the children. And all the children didn't have a screen in front of them in his class, but he was instructing. In the other classes I went to, the teachers were sitting down and every kid had a screen in front of them. And I was more impressed with the teacher that was standing up, writing on the blackboard and instructing the kids. I believe the children learn more when the instructor is there speaking and writing instead of being in front of the screen. What would you do to try to encourage that activity in the schools?
I'll try and make this long story short. If you were to ask anyone who knew me at BWXT, they would say, don't stand between Joe and the whiteboard, because I believe being at a board and putting something in front of everyone at the same time is an extremely effective way of getting that point across to everybody, making sure they're engaged. When there is conflict in a room at all, putting that on a board instead of face-to-face helps. That's more of a corporate than a classroom, but it's not completely inapplicable to classroom. Being at the board means that the teacher is engaged. Now, again, you said it was a blackboard. If I had to have chalk on a blackboard now, I'd cry because I'm used to my nice dry erasers on whiteboards, and we do progress, and there are now smart boards where you can write and save it. So
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to technology. I think it's great. Being able to save that board with a screen hit so that the students would have that. But I agree also 100% that having 20 or so faces on their own world, you lose some of the peripheral positive impact. If kids are wondering what does integral mean, I don't know what that is. Algebra, various literature studies, yes, I think you are losing something of the elbow-to-elbow value that would get an education from that. I'm not saying there's no place for it, but I don't think the technology is good in and of itself, period, just for its own sake.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Pearl?
What do you think the greatest threat to Lynchburg City Schools is?
I'd like to answer what the greatest challenge is. Threat's kind of a scary word. I'm going to try and shape the question this way. I mentioned earlier that it's not just Lynchburg City Schools, throughout Virginia, and I'm not sure if it's nationwide, but we're facing declining enrollments. The population of Virginia is not plummeting. So Lynchburg, all public schools are certainly post-pandemic dealing with various challenges. It was mentioned in previous meetings that not too long ago, about 5% of Lynchburg City students attended something outside of Lynchburg City schools, and now that's significantly higher. Dealing with a declining enrollment is a long-term important goal. We're going to have maybe more immediate urgent, and we will have upcoming urgent issues, but we have a long-term challenge to maintain the culture of Lynchburg City schools. Superintendent Brabrand, I heard some criticisms of him, some justified, maybe some not. One thing I heard him criticized for was pushing the motto, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I heard numerous beloved, wonderful members of our teachers say that that was simplistic and they didn't like it. I loved it because it's basically one of the key of the 7 habits is first things first. Keeping academics first before anything else is the way to get to making the Lynchburg City schools the magnet school system for Virginia as a whole. Not very long ago, ECU Glass and Heritage were easily comparable to some of the best schools you're going to see in the Richmond or Northern Virginia area. The population of Lynchburg hasn't changed that radically. We're still a fairly economically vibrant city. We can get there, not in 3 months or 6 months or a year, but the culture and the idea that that's where we ought to be, that has to be in our line of sight if we want to make those kind of improvements.
Good morning, how are you?
Good morning, Mayor Reed.
Thank you for your service. Maybe
Oh,
you said, how many
thank
years again?
It was 5 years in uniform,
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
before I came to Lynchburg.
Wonderful. And thank you for being willing to serve again. So I think you were in here when you heard my question earlier about politics and, invading the school board and the challenging decisions that the school boards around the country are having to make, including our own. I think you already kind of hit on this in one of your previous answers about classrooms and really what should be happening in the classrooms or just the academic subject of that classroom. And anything else happening outside of the classroom, any other discussions? Am I right in reading kind of that you alluded to that?
I certainly believe that we as a community can be open to many other issues and questions outside of the classroom. There's the classroom, there's schools in general. Things can happen out on the athletic field or other avenues, but I would really want to see the classroom phase be strictly devoted to the academic instruction of our kids.
Thank you. So I'll ask you the same question I asked earlier, just because I think it's important to just, again, consider it all, is with the vote that was taken the other week about the specific transgender policy and being faced with things like that, where would you have stood on that vote?
The incoming members of the school board have the advantage of having guidelines passed down from the governor, vetted by the attorney general, and voted on by the previous school board. Looking at it takes a bit of searching to actually find out the content of the governor's guidelines. The governor's guidelines I do agree with, but they are not as cold and factual. They do not only encourage but demand that every school system be as welcoming as possible to every student and to make every student feel safe, to have opportunities and options for students who, however they identify. They also protect the rights and interests of all students and the parents. But it would be a lost opportunity to simply focus on the 3 or 4 that deal with the school sports, bathrooms, and how our teachers are to address the kids. We also, it is a mandate on the school board to ensure that all children feel safe and valued, regardless of their individual condition. So I wouldn't want to let that slip by too badly, but I do appreciate having the guidelines, and yes, I would have voted with the majority of the board.
Okay, thank you. And again, the point where you just, that those are the political decisions that a lot of school boards are facing, aside from obviously having to hopefully consider more about education and making the best educational decisions. But it is what we're facing these days.
I'm sure that won't be the last.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you again for coming in. Really appreciate it. Given the current climate, over the past few years, we've had some challenges with our school board and city council and the unity. What would you bring to the table to bring more cohesiveness to the body?
Again, I've said earlier that my previous leadership and corporate experience doesn't exactly fit a cut and paste, but one of the things that does help in a relationship that BWXT had with the government and the labs is the labs would tell us exactly how they wanted to be communicated with. The vendor will provide reports on this, this, and this to this level of detail. And if that was really too onerous, BWXT could say, well, that's great. It's going to require 25 people working full-time to provide you those reports. So there was a bit of negotiation back and forth, but the school board does report to the council, and the council can direct the school board to provide reports in a specific format. I've heard numerous folks talk about needing to improve our transparency, and I absolutely believe that. I believe transparency needs a lot of work. I don't necessarily ascribe any nefarious motives there. A lot of it's just poor or suboptimal communication and setting the expectations for communications. If a report should be put out monthly, how are we doing to the budget? And not just to the overall budget, but down to the levels. That might, A, avoid surprises, and B, keep the level of communication on a more collegial level. So,
All right, thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Okay. Well, there's all kinds of educational and work opportunities with employers, universities, and colleges in our area, and so that the students can participate in them. And I understand that sometimes our superintendent is not receptive to those programs. If there were those programs in place, or some of them there are, how would you relate to the superintendent in regards to this? What actions would you take? How would you talk to her about participation?
I guess the way you described it means that the school board and anyone who concurs with me about those opportunities has a sales job in front of them. And that's to some extent how I look at it. If the superintendent sees things differently, there may be reasons for that. If there are reasons that we on the board, if I'm selected, or I myself, would like to make the case that we can do better and should do better at planting the seeds for other opportunities that may be really optimal for a significant portion of our students, then it's incumbent upon myself or anyone who shares that opinion to sell the superintendent on that. The superintendent reports to the board. The board sets policy and does its best to administrate that policy. Again, too long story, I'll try to push it down. We at BWXT were really fortunate several years ago. Senator Mark Warner came and spoke to us in the cafeteria, tried to keep it as nonpartisan as possible. But one point he made I really hadn't struck me is he was very frustrated with members of both houses and both parties who think we're going to set this law and we're done, because setting the policy is the beginning, not the end. And you've got to continue to administrate, supervise, and be intrusive when you set a policy, whether it's on non-traditional, or I wouldn't say non-traditional, non-4-year degree opportunities, but that's going to be the school board's job. And obviously the city council has to take an intrusive view towards the school board also. So I would look forward to that.
Thank you.
School board.
And I'll just be real quick, just commenting on some of the things you said that I appreciate. But when you said that numbers don't lie, and we have to address these challenges, you know, engineers have that ability. So I think that's a good thing. Secondly, where you had those goals, having those high expectations of 100% graduation, 100% attendance, 100% having a plan after, I think that's good. We need to raise the bar high, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malloy. We really appreciate you coming in today and taking the time out, and we hope to have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you all members. of
Appreciate
council.
it.
I appreciate it.
Yes. Okay. If y'all want to take a 2-minute break, I guess if anybody needs to use the restroom while we're waiting for the feed to pop up, go ahead. Take a little recess. 2-minute recess? Yeah, sure. Or 3 minutes. We'll just, if you have to go. Oh, there she is.
Hey, good morning. Praise God. Hey, good morning. How are you, Mary Jane? Doing okay? Good. Marty, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Test, test. Selena, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We're just taking a 3-minute recess, and then we'll get you on.
Beautiful.
It's so weird because I'm hearing something that sounds like the, well, no, it just, it just sounds like the thing that you hear at the ultrasound or the heartbeat of a baby, and I'm like, it just gives you flashbacks. It's funny. You won't know. I could.
What do you mean? They will plug it in. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Alicia, we have 4, so we can go ahead and get going. You good? Yeah, I'll pop in.
Thanks.
Let me let broadcasting know real quick.
So all those boxes back there, is that lunch? No, big lunch box.
Okay, we will get started. Good morning, Ms. Morgan. How are you?
I am well, and you all?
Good. Yes, good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. We'll go ahead and let you give a 1 or 2 minute introduction and just go ahead and remind everybody why you would like to be a candidate for school board.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, my name is Selena Morgan. I am a mom, a community member, nonprofit director, and that's just a few of the names and titles that I have the pleasure of wearing. Over the last several years, I've had the ability to see Lynchburg City Schools through very many different lenses, and I would like the ability to take those lenses into perspective when we look at policies, procedures, budgets, and continued partnerships that are created, maintained, and modified to reflect our students, our teachers, our parents, our community, and admin. I also value our families. My heart to see our children, my children, all of the babies in our city thrive. I understand the importance of family, which is why I do go so hard. And it's also why, unfortunately, I'm not able to be there in person with you all. Currently, I am home in Buffalo taking care with my mom, her mom, who recently took ill and has been in and out of the hospital. So what I would love to be able to do is be in person, but unfortunately I needed to be here. But I want to stress, my role in being able to see the different variety of hats in the way things are run. And so I think that the Lynchburg City Schools families want to know that they matter and that they're valued and that we as a team within the city are all one. And we share those as well. So my passion there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we'll go ahead and start with our first question with Dr. Wilder.
Yes, thank you so much for volunteering your service for our school board. Really appreciate you today offering yourself to our children, our community. School system has so many programs, 15 plus, a plethora of programs about learning loss or about achievement gap or gifted programs of this nature. And we still have some challenges with our SOL scores and achievement gap. What program do you really like in our school system that you think works well? And what program would you like to see done or that's not done or done more of to address that learning loss, to address the achievement gap?
So I have actually worked in Lynchburg City Schools several years ago. So I'm going to take it back a little bit to one of the programs that I know that has been working. And then some of the other ones that have been introduced in the last several years. So one of the greatest things that I thought that was introduced was when we put our kindergarten IAs in the classroom. I know that early childhood education helps build a solid foundation for our children and the importance of literacy and how that affects our students, especially, in kindergarten all the way through graduation. What I saw when we were able to do that was the additional support that was given to our students that initially allowed us to be able to hit and hard focus some of our students that had not been to pre-K. And it was the first time that they were learning and seeing letters and letter sounds. And so with that work, we were able to get our kids ready for reading and first grade ready. With a solid kindergarten foundation, I strongly believe that when that's solid, they are able to build correctly first, second, and third grade and so forward. When our students are not reading, there's some gaps there. And we know when there's not a solid foundation, that the challenges continue to seep through as they're building because they can't read their testing. So their test scores reflect that. Behavior issues seem to build there as well when, we can't read, but we don't want to say that. So when we find those things, that additional support in the classroom, I felt like helped build a solid foundation. I don't know about you all, but I don't want a house with a cracked foundation. As a homeowner, makes things a little complicated. So that's just one of the things. I also think that our summer credit recovery program helps our students. It's kind of giving them the opportunity to kind of correct a wrong so that they're graduating on time. That is important for me. I have seen how our suspension center over the last year or so has helped with our students to focus and challenge them to not return, but to take their actions and to be better, take accountability for their actions and to be better. I think the new leadership and the incredible work that has been done at Fort Hill, making it a safe and a focused learning center. Our students feel loved there and they're cared in that building and they don't feel like criminals, but focusing on learning and being who they are. I would also like to give focus on the recent addition to our behavior techs in our building that are helping to reduce learning loss. They work with the students that are struggling, which is usually a lot of times those things come from outside. So it's not necessarily things that our teachers can actually kind of correct, but how the outside things, but because it's life, that's just, the reality. It comes into our buildings and we can't do anything like that about that. So our techs have fortunately been able to help address those things. They're there to help reduce the classroom interruptions and allow teachers to do more teaching and less crisis intervention, ensuring our students are learning and providing our students what they need and the additional support and resources, allowing all of our students to have safe and conducive learning environments, which helps reduce the learning loss.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Dolan?
Thank you. Good morning. What is your experience with budget and finance?
So fortunately, I have had the ability to work with both our city dollars, of course, a personal budget, as well as nonprofit budget. And if I can tell you anything, I love top quality, but at a good price. With my recent experience with working for the city, I understand the importance of managing somebody else's money and ensuring that we're not throwing away tax dollars, but ensuring that they are purchased responsibly and with the mindset that it's our residents' tax dollars and should be handled as such. I am very mindful when it comes to taxpayer dollars. I do not believe in throwing away money, but I also believe that we should put our money where our treasure is. I believe that our spending reflects what we value. I have valued quality education, quality teachers, classroom access to technology, and I believe our students should feel supported and have access to the best, but also while being fiscally responsible.
Thank you.
Councilman Henderson?
Good morning. Obviously, there's different roles. We have the roles of the parents, the teachers, the principals. On here, you have a couple things listed that you think that the student's voice isn't being heard. Describe for me how the student's voice, the voices of students aren't being heard.
So what in recent experience with, obviously I just had a daughter that graduated GLASS, and in other conversations, our students, especially in our community, see things and they have a different perspective. And we've created, in this past year, there were focus groups created, kind of getting feedback from the students on what would you like to see here, or what would you like to see there, and even so far, so much as scheduling. And one thing the students did say, like they wanted to see more pep rallies and more interaction there, and they got that. But when it came to certain things like scheduling, or they don't want to be at school at 7:40 in the morning. They feel like if it was a later start time, they'd get up, they'd be ready to learn. That watching kids get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Just certain pieces like that, and making sure that we're bringing them to the table and we're actually genuinely listening to hear what they have to say. The perspective that our students have, because a lot of our kids have lived through situations that they don't necessarily should have had to deal with as 14, 15, 12-year-olds sometimes, honestly. And so a lot of times we put that in, well, you don't know what you're talking about, or, okay, well, we'll take it into consideration, but we don't necessarily do that. I think our students don't feel value in that piece of actually knowing that, well, I mean, we could say something, but they're not going to listen. Or even teachers. We've had some comments where I've had some of my humans, my babies in school, and the comments was made about them being in foster care or them being in a group home. That's not for conversation. But understanding, even though they're in those situations, they still should have an opinion and they still have a voice in how they navigate these situations. Sometimes we, even as adults, could lean and learn from that. Like maybe, there's a method to the madness. And I'm not saying at all that it's all right and we should just soak it all up. But I think that they don't feel heard, and we're not making decisions with their input at all times.
Councilman Mischins?
Good morning, how are you? I think your audio cut out a little bit, but it looked like you said you were doing good, so.
I am. Can you hear me now?
See a smile on your face, so I'm going to go with good on that. So, I'm going to, kind of a simple question. Code of Virginia allows school boards to approve and establish public charter schools. What's your position on charter schools?
So I think charter schools have the potential to be great. I know that they don't necessarily require the local dollars that our public schools require. But what I would say is when it comes to charter schools, a lot of charter schools have the freedom and the control to kind of navigate their curriculum and everything on their own. And what I would like to see is maybe not so much of that in our community, just because of our fit for our community. I don't think that we need anything that could have the potential of dividing our community. I think that when we have a significant number in our community that are vulnerable, I think sometimes when we incorporate a charter school that can kind of create its own, I think sometimes that helps create an additional divide, especially a lot of times charter schools, you got to have set uniform and set things. And I think just being a little bit mindful, right now I'm in a city full of charter schools, and then you have your public schools. And for our city, the city of Lynchburg, I don't think that it would be a good fit for our students.
Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Good morning. How are you?
I am well, and you?
Praise God, I'm fine also. I've talked to several teachers that fear for their safety in our public schools. How would you address those problems?
So I believe that there's accountability in all of our students' actions. I believe that behaviors and things need to be addressed. I do also believe that when we are strategically placing students in our buildings, that there is some level of classroom management that needs to be taught. I think that intentionality, I tell anybody that works with youth, our children can smell from a mile away, whether you are for them or whether you are against them. Rather you're showing up for a paycheck or rather you're actually showing up because you have a passion and you want to be here and you want to see our students excel. I understand we get wary. I worked in a kindergarten classroom and sometimes by spring break, I was counting down the days. So I understand. However, our students in our city, and I say our city because I do believe that Lynchburg has a genuinely just different kind of population and we have different challenges, and intentionality and how do we manage our classroom? How are we talking to our students? If a student is being yelled at and screamed at and belittled and at all times, how are you opening the day? How are you setting the tone in your classroom? What does that feel like? Do they feel like you're against them? Or so I'm not saying everything is on our teachers at all. I believe in accountability 100%, both our students and our parents. But I do also know that there's some challenges in that perspective and what is that tone in that classroom? What does that feel like? Do they feel loved? Do they feel supported? But I do have a zero tolerance for disrespect. That goes for me, my house, my children, and the expectations that are set when they leave my home. And so I understand that. But I also, what am I setting? What does that feel like? Am I seeing them as a person, as their individual self? So I want all our teachers to be safe. I want all of our babies to be safe. But I also know that I want to know are you creating a learning environment that's conducive and that they actually feel like when they walk in that building at EC Glass, when they walk in that building, I know that they know that Dr. Danny Rowe loves them.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Foldy?
What do you think the greatest threat to Lynchburg City Schools is?
I think the greatest threat to Lynchburg City Schools is trust. I think an effective school boards have collaborative relationships with staff and families that they support in the community, and they establish the expectation is to establish and maintain a strong communication structure to inform and engage all internal and external stakeholders in setting and achieving district goals. We've seen the last couple years that there's been the engagement piece, but the results don't necessarily reflect the information that was pulled from the community. Myself as a parent, an advocate, things just don't always, what's communicated doesn't always come out how it was communicated. Things are done differently. So the trust is our biggest threat. I think the growing concern over the safety, the wellness and the care of our students and the community, we just haven't felt that. And it's led to an issue with mistrust. I mean, as a mom, I've served on this past year, several committees. And when information was presented, what we saw trickle down was not what was said. And in order to build that, we need to make sure that our actions are matching our words. And so I do believe that trust is the biggest threat. And if we do not fix and address that, we can't continue to blaze forward. We can try and push our students, but if the home is not there, that's, I can't continue, to want to send my kids to a school system and I don't trust what's being said and, those things. So I think that that's one of our biggest threats right now that needs to be fixed.
Thank you.
Hello again. How are you? So I think you've been probably watching and paying attention to the question I've asked. I'm just going to ask you the same question I've asked the others about, politics at the school board level and what school boards are facing now, having to deal with political issues and people coming into the school board meetings with very strong opinions on those political issues that the school boards are having to vote on. And as you probably saw, our school board had to vote on the governor's transgender policy here recently, and it was a very divided issue here in the city. Where would you have stood on that had you had to vote on that issue?
So, as a mom with daughters and one son, as far as the governor's ruling, first of all, of course, thankfully, a lot of those really, really hard decisions come from, beyond us. And then it's just a matter of putting them in place. But I would have voted for the governor's decision. I have heard this from my own daughter, and sharing those spaces, they're not comfortable. But I also understand that all of our students need to be comfortable. And so how do we address that? That's when we have to work as a team with both our community, our parents. How do we solve this issue to make sure all of our kids feel safe, all of our kids feel valued, all of our kids feel safe? Feel heard. And so how do we create that? What does that look like for us with school board, with city council, with our parents, with our community partners? What do we do to make sure that everybody has a space and they feel that they can be themselves in that space? But also we can't enforce those things on other students and other children, because they still also have feelings as well. And so it's being inclusive, but being mindful and making sure that we do things and we handle those things to the best of our ability to make sure that all of our students are seen, heard, and safe.
Thank you. And that was my point, was, just the willingness to be able to be kind of put on the spot with those really challenging political decisions as school board members, knowing that you're going to have some people that agree with you and some people that don't. And it carries over, as you know, Ms. Morgan, that some of those more controversial decisions will follow you out of the school board room and into your personal life, and that you have to be able to, deal with that in the public eye, as school board members now do in most cities, as we do on council. So just the comfort level of knowing that you're going to be facing with more of those types of votes, and also just being comfortable to explain where you stand on issues. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Dr. Wilder?
Again, thank you so much for coming, well, for meeting us virtually to talk about offering your service for the school board. We appreciate that. Given our current climate of our school board and city council relationship, and I served on the school board for 9 years, and I've seen kind of both sides, what would you bring to the table? I know you're kind of in a unique position, and you have some information, but not information, you worked on that side as well, on this side as well. What would you bring to the table to bring more unity to the body?
So of course, yes, with my recent work directly for my city managers and the building of the budget and the creating the team and the meetings and things like that, I think our students, whether we know it or not, everybody is watching us, especially as the two bodies, right? And this is who's making the decisions, right? And so what's important to me is making sure that one, communication. If I am a over communicator, so I don't ever want it to be oh, well, this, nope, I'm gonna spill it all out. So one of the greatest things I think is communication. We can't set expectations for people when we haven't communicated them. And so one of the greatest things, just even moving forward with my work with the city manager's office, is just understanding we're a team. Like our common goal is our city thriving. And if our students are not thriving, our schools are not thriving, it's a challenge when, families are moving here and they're looking at our school ratings. And so we have to be one cohesive unit. And that's what I want. It should never be a question of what's this. Let me respond to your email. If it's 1:00 in the morning and my phone, let me respond to your email. I don't ever want it to be any of that. And I mean the same across the board. If we're all working towards the common goal, our babies, like I want our kids to love this city. I love Lynchburg and I didn't grow up here, but I love home. And so it's just stressing the importance of being one. We are one. And that's, what I want to bring to the table. We're a team all together. There's no one side LCS here in Lynchburg City. No, we're one. Our dollars are, pretty much the same. We need you all. So, but even our decisions, like we can, certain things, but it still comes back down. School closing, things like that. We're one. And if we're not all on the same page, our students, it reflects and they see that in our parents, and we don't need the divisiveness in our community and in our schools. We're one. We need to be one.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Selena, what would be your top priority should you be appointed to school board?
So my top priorities are always going to be my babies, their safety, their success, working with our community partners. We know that there's Delta Star that will be having several hundred jobs coming in, Framatome, and just making sure, what are we doing? How are we creating? I sat on the CTE committee this past year on what does that look like. I went with a group of our girls to New York City from the cosmetology program and their licensure piece. And so our students is number one for me. Next is our staff, our admin, our teachers, all of them, the ones that are in there day in, day out doing the work, the ones that we turn our kids over to, all my little tiny humans that I'm watching, to our bus drivers, making sure that they feel heard and they feel valued, because you do your job differently when you feel valued and you feel heard. And then last but not least would be our relationships, our community partners, even if financially as a city, like we can make a budget, but then when there's shortfalls, our community partners, when they feel valued and they know that we're creating a pipeline for them so that they have employers. What does those partnerships look like? How can we collaborate to, all right, hey, you have this program, you need, $10,000 of this project or something like that. If we have and we create those programs, and I mean through all of our schools, and our partnerships are intact and they feel valued, then, I think that that'll help support us in some of our shortcomings, or how can we create programs without taxing the city? Our community partners will feel valued and will be like, oh no, I want to do that. So those are my priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. We're out of time at this point, so
We'll be certain to follow up with you when we have a decision, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our list from District 1 is Nettie Webb. Good morning, welcome, and please feel free to provide a couple minutes about your interest and why you should be on the school board.
Thank you. Well, my name's Nettie Webb, and I'm from District 1. I think I've met with many of you this past year because Lynchburg City Schools is at a critical juncture right now of either in the next 10 to 20 years having a productive public school system that attracts business owners, that attracts families, that attracts young people who are coming from our colleges to actually want to stay. And I think that's something that's really important, and we've seen this past year with the decisions, but not even this past year, continuously through Lynchburg City Schools, a cycle of not really having a plan, not implementing properly a plan. There's a structure, there's a framework, but there's not a concrete details. There's not a way that this would be enforced. You see that with the 5-year goals, you see that with the master plan, you see that throughout the time. And I think something that I bring as a perspective is the extent that I understand and have been around Lynchburg City Schools. My mom has taught in Lynchburg City Schools for the past 38 years. I literally grew up in her classroom. I grew up volunteering there, being a teacher assistant, working with students. I grew up knowing the struggles of teachers, hearing what they were saying about not having support, hearing what they were saying about classroom struggles, hearing also what they were saying when you had other policies implemented that helped their classroom. One person discussed having IAs in kindergarten classrooms. Well, my mom did 12 years in kindergarten, and I remember vividly when that policy went through and they had about 25 students per class, and they brought in IAs, and seeing the complete difference of when you have someone who's properly prepared also to be in that position can make for students learning, student capacity, behavior management, classroom management, and seeing that. Now I understand also that might not be possible with the current employee numbers that you can have in Lynchburg City Schools, but what is possible is small classroom sizes. And I think that perspective, that understanding of what works in education, what works for teachers is something that I want to bring to the school board because there seems to be a disconnect on what works in education, what is the best practices in education, what you need to do to implement education policy. And I think that experience that I have from knowing Lynchburg City Schools, knowing that we've said this is kicking the can down the road, well, it's not just this administration. It's not just the past administration. It's been something for the past 20 to 30 years that has been happening. And that's not intentional. That's because the wheel's broken to continue to cause circumstances that make it seem like nothing is progressing, nothing's being done, because nothing really can be done if you don't fix the concrete foundation that is the problem. And I want to come in with my experience as an engineer, as an analyst, as someone who also has a very interdisciplinary background, which is critical for very complicated problems. You can't just address it just with one thing. You have to look at it from multiple perspectives. And looking at it from multiple perspectives also gives me the perspective that you have to be able to work with people of all different backgrounds, all different experiences, all different ages, all of that to actually have a solution. And I think that's something that I've done in every program. All my work that I've done is working collaboratively with people who I might agree with, who I might not agree with, but seeing what they can bring to the table, seeing that they care, seeing that their core ethics have a perspective that they are actually trying there. And we might just have differences, but we can communicate cordially. We can talk and create a solution that really works for Lynchburg and not just different groups, not just different populations. And I think that has been completely ignored really on our school board. And that would be a different perspective that I would bring, something that I have been practicing, and you all have seen me practicing it throughout this entire year. I have not just worked with individual people or people who align specifically with my interest. I've reached out to everyone. I've tried to work with everyone. I've had meetings with whoever would respond to me and really enjoyed working with every different perspective to try to actually come up with a plan. And in those meetings, I said, I'll do anything possible to make what we're talking about actually happen. So that's why I'm here. I said in those meetings, I'll do it. I said, I'm not gonna give up. And I wanted to stick true to my word. So thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Webb. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. We'll start off with our first question from Dr. Wilder.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for coming in today and offering your services for our school board. Really appreciate that for our children and for our community. Lynchburg School System has a plethora of programs for children who may have some learning loss or some challenges in learning to our high achievers. So we really have a diverse population, but it's being an urban school setting. But you may still have some challenges in our SOL scores and our achievement gap. What programs do you like that you see that's working well? And what do you suggest we need to do more of to address those learning loss students as well as those achievement gap challenges?
That's a great question, and it's something that I'm very passionate about different interests. If you look at my background, I have a background in engineering, but specifically also of trying to increase the groups that you have coming into engineering. I was, as obvious, a female engineer going in, one of maybe 30 people in my class. That would be the only woman engineer in that class. I understand, though, as you know from research, the more different perspectives that you have from different backgrounds, different growing up situations, the better the design, the better the work is. So one thing I really want to do, also understanding that we are in the urban district, is work on programs and work on building different community programs that help students get into STEM early, that help students who have been underrepresented in STEM go through. And I think you see that you can do it with our accelerated programs. You can do it with the Ghost Center, and really not just trying to influence. If you look at the numbers, some schools have much larger portions of students who get accepted into the Ghost Center than other districts. And we need to reevaluate where those numbers are coming from and how we evaluate who is gifted and who isn't gifted. It is a test that students take when they are in around first grade and also other components. But if you understand developmentally, first grade, 7 to 8, could be when their brains are developing to be able to do well. They might not be on that track when that test is going to say that they are gifted, but that's not saying that their capacity and their ability to do that isn't there by the time they get to the 3rd grade. So we really need to look at who and how we're evaluating can be in those extension programs, because right now we're ignoring a large group of people who could be extended. I think also, though, when we go to our college, or to our high school, I've said before, I did not go to high school at Glass. My parents chose, even though my mom is a Lynchburg City School teacher, because of that, for me to go to a boarding school in Northern Virginia. And that was also largely due to when I was coming up, EC Glass was dropping AP classes. They didn't have the teachers who were qualified to have the classes if you weren't accepted into the governor's school to be on the path that I wanted to be on. And I think we really need to evaluate the quality of teacher that we're attracting so that we can actually provide the resources that our students need to be successful. We've heard over and over in these interviews that people want to have students be able to go into a career, go into a community, go in and be productive citizens. Well, that also means that you have mentors who can mentor them to get to that place, that you have teachers who can have conflict resolution, that you have teachers who do want to make relationships, that this isn't a clock in, clock out job, that this is something that continues, and that you're really an educator. And I feel like we do miss part of that because we aren't able to attract as many quality teachers. So really that extension program would be it, but also restorative justice. Also, when you're going to alternative education, I think many students before have been written off when they're going into those programs, haven't been seeing the potential, especially as this has gotten younger and younger that we've had alternative education. And I think a lot of that also, as we see the younger and younger conflict resolution needing to be happening, is that our teachers who are coming into the elementary education and the teachers that we're attracting are not properly being prepared to have classroom management, to have behavioral management in an urban school district. And they're not prepared then to do what is necessary to have a safe and productive environment in the classroom. So we need to do more actual training, more actual, not an hour-long professional development, but actual training that makes it so teachers can create a productive classroom in that early education time period in elementary school, so that we don't pipeline students to be in alternative education starting from elementary school, going to middle school, and then going to high school, and then feeling written off, them feeling like no one's there to support them having those components. And that goes into also, as I'll probably talk about later, what you teach in the classroom, how you teach it, and how you bring students in to want to be engaged in learning. But thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your willingness to serve on the LCS School Board. You seem to have some critical feelings about our current school board and the manner in which some decisions were made, how they were made. What specifically would you have done differently as it relates to those decisions? What?
I would have done my homework. I would have actually done the research. I would have actually looked at the analysis. I would have said, when you look at a problem and you openly say when you are announce the plan that they gave you guys from MGT, I think it was the August meeting, that they gave interviews right after that, Superintendent Edwards and Chair Gupta, that this was not thorough. A lot more preparation needed to be done, a lot more analysis. And I've seen the MGT program and analysis, both the draft and the final, because we FOIA'd it. And that analysis is not thorough. That analysis is best practices of things that you would throw out to any school district. It was not worth the money that they spent there, and they were right, it wasn't a plan. But did they actually try to make a plan? Did they actually take what they had and expand upon it? No. They said, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And then September 19th hit, I think, and they said, well, this is a really complicated situation that I don't think any of us could solve individually. And they were so unwilling to work together or ask for help or ask from guidance or experts in other areas that they said, let's just pass it through. Let's just do it. And now you see there's still no plan. There's no plan for the rezoning. There was no plan for what they were gonna do when they closed the virtual program and where these teachers were gonna go. There was no plan for what was gonna happen when you have untenured teachers thinking that they might not have contracts and you have a flood of teachers leaving. And now how do you fill positions? There has been no plan, no thoughtfulness the entire time. And you've had people say, well, we didn't know the information. We didn't have this. We trusted what they were giving us. Well, you're not doing your job. Your job is to also fact check. Your job is to do your homework. Your job is to put the effort in that you said you're gonna give when you came to this position and not say this is a bigger commitment than I thought it was going to be, so I can't do it, and now we're gonna ruin, really, the future of education in Lynchburg City Schools because we don't wanna do the work. So that's really where I disagree. I don't think our school board members actually want, the majority of them, not all of them, but there are school board members who do not want to do the actual work with each other to have a plan.
Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, Swett.
Good morning.
Good to see you today. You know, and we're going to, I guess, follow up on that and kind of change it slightly. Your words in here, it says, which is a good perspective, but as a former student who witnessed the academic decline firsthand. So I've been around for a while and I've witnessed school boards. I know you're pretty critical of the current one, but the academic decline has been happening for decades. Lots of school board members over the last 2 decades have said, you know, almost operated more as a cheerleader for the division. In spite of the schools, we had 2 high schools that were ranked tops in the country. As an engineer, you look at data and facts, and you see that now they've gone down to like a 2 or a 3 on Zillow by grade schools. That means something has got to change, but there has been this continuous, well, we just need more money. We just need to cheerlead for the schools. Where I think I do disagree is I've seen those reports, you know, those last ones. There's 2 consultant reports. And night and day difference between the school boards before taking action versus now, because you witnessed firsthand the decline in what's really critical is the improvement of education or the academic rigor of why you said you went to a different school. So what can we do to get back to actually, as a school board member, that's going to improve academic vigor and not let that continue to decline?
Of course, thank you for that question. I'll try to keep it short because I have many ideas on this, and if you want to have more, I can definitely have a follow-up conversation or send you emailed responses to you all. But I'll go through a blueprint list of them. I think it starts in early education. Right now, if you look at research for reading early education, you know that from 5 to 8 is any time that developmentally a student's brain might then be able to comprehend reading. And that developmental part, you can't control as a teacher. Like, no matter how many times a kindergarten or first grade teacher tries to have a student understand phonics, tries to have a student understand reading, if they are not developmentally ready for it, they're not going to be able to do it. But the thing is, with our current system and how it is forced upon schools to take SOLs, how it's forced upon the pass-through, there is a pressure, though, with Lynchburg City Schools and a connotation that retaining students is bad. And that retaining students means that they're not smart enough to do this. That the connotation and the stigma of doing that is detracting from the fact of understanding developmentally you might not be there. And if you need to get to the 3rd grade and take that reading SOL to continue to be able to do the social studies, to do the science, to do the math, you have to be able to read. And if you can't read, then and you're getting passed on to the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade, and you're more behind, and you're more behind, and you're more defeated, well, it's 2 problems then. Students can't read, and they act out in class, because what else are they gonna do? They understand nothing. They're not able to participate, and they're kids, so they're going to be more disruptive. And what else is gonna happen? They're gonna get so disinterested and upset about school because they feel like they're dumber than other people, they feel like they're not with their peers, that they no longer care about school for middle school or high school or going anywhere further or doing CTE. That starts in early elementary education. And I think we really need to have teachers, again, who have cultural competency that doesn't put a pressure on students or parents to pass them on, that doesn't have this, well, they're 6, they need to go to XYZ. I know firsthand, my parents, I have 2 older brothers, they sent my oldest, it was kind of like a trial run. He went to kindergarten when he was a young 5, and they said, maybe not the best idea. I have a summer birthday, my other brother has a summer birthday, so we're sending you when you're 6. And that was the best decision my parents could have made, because developmentally, then I was ready. That was why I was able to progress. Then you also have the fact that what we're teaching students right now is not what engages them. We have textbooks from the 1990s that talk about topics that any kid who's grown up with an iPhone can't relate to. And so you need to also look at the communities that students in Lynchburg are coming from and try to ingrain their backgrounds, their cultures, the fact that they're also in the 21st century into the curriculum that you're teaching, so that they're like, wait, I can see myself doing that. I could see myself going to this place, using the mentors there so that they can envision themselves really being in education. And then I think it comes down to also having small classes. If you look right now, Lynchburg City Schools' average of class size is about 16.9 students, which is the most recommended average student for elementary school is 15 to 18 students. If you look at the research, when you bump it up to the comparison of 22 to 25, there's a plethora of research. Some big facts are for students who are from low income or students of color, 6 months different learning loss that you have from if you have a 15 to 18 student classroom to a 22 to 25. 3 months for students who come from more privileged backgrounds. So it's huge either way. When you go, if you go the entire 13 years of students in the school system, it's about $157,000 saved for that student over their 13 years if K through 3, they have small class sizes. Because you don't have to have as much remediation. You don't have to have all these services. So it saves the district money long-term also, which is the vision that we have to be having. Not just this immediate short-term crisis, but how can we be fiscally responsible the entirety of the future? And then also when you have small class sizes, you have differentiation of learning. You have teachers who are able to really extend your students who are high achievers, who have really great capabilities, and then you're also able to target the students who are struggling. You cannot do that in a class of 25. And so those would be the 3 big things I would say to address the achievement gap, because it's critical that you start in early elementary.
Councilman Shins?
What's your position on charter schools?
They have to be implemented correctly. I, again, didn't go to high school here, went to high school at a boarding school, and my roommate for 3 years came from a charter school in Atlanta. It was a phenomenal system for them. Had extension learning, had differentiation, had programs that really able to develop. My concern is in Lynchburg, seeing the lack of plans, seeing the lack of preparation, seeing the lack of ability to really put a structure in that would work in our district. At this point, I don't think it can work. I think it has the potential if the work is done. I think they have potential to have the differentiation. I think it has potential, if it's done correctly, to make resources and to have more extension and to have different opportunities of focusing more on vocational at some programs, focusing more on different things. I think you have to have differentiation, though, in the options at your charter schools. And you also have to ensure that the quality of teacher at those charter schools is not disparately different. You just have to make sure that you're getting the same quality education at them, and they can work. But in Lynchburg currently, a lot of work needs to be done in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years for that to actually be practical, and not increasing the achievement gap, not increasing disparities, not increasing disinterest, not decreasing the quality teachers who are just in the public schools. We can't just be taking our very quality teachers from the public schools then and them all go into the charter schools, because then what happens to the students who are there? So I think it's something that proper preparation and planning would need to go into, and it could work, but not currently.
Councilman Taylor?
Discipline. You said you've been in the school system, your mother been in the school system for 30-some years. I know, Ms. Webb. How have you witnessed discipline decline?
I think this might shock people, but I don't think it has really declined. I think it was covered up what was really there. I think there's been manipulation of the discipline needed in schools, of what was happening, behavior problems in classrooms, because principals have felt pressure maybe from the top down to not have schools that have high referral rates, to not have schools that have this, to not have schools that show disparities in your referral rates between different demographics. And that created a system that discipline didn't really happen. I've seen, and it depends on your school, but there are schools also that some students will get asked to leave because of their discipline, and they're sent to other schools, and then they can't leave. Like, they have to stay, because where else are these students necessarily gonna go? I've seen the fact that if you don't document these things, if they aren't given referrals, then they don't get the services that they need, or that would be beneficial. But if they're documented, then also it looks as if, well, the teacher doesn't know classroom behavior management. The teacher doesn't know this. And I think really it comes that we don't have enforced from the top down the support structure for teachers to be able to have behavior management and classroom management. We have a system right now that looks at teachers that when they have students who are struggling, as if they don't know how to run their classroom and it's their fault. And I think we need to change that dynamic and that support system. And there is a candidate who talked about trust. There is no trust right now between administration, principals, and teachers. And that trust is not just from this past year. Teachers have lost trust continuously, probably over the past 10 to 15 years, and it has just progressed and progressed. And I think it's something that to have trust again, to have discipline again, teachers need to know, okay, if I send a student to the office, that it's not gonna be a free-for-all, that they're not gonna get candy, that they're not going to be able to roam around the office or the building without any structure, without any discipline, and then they'll be sent to the classroom to do whatever they want to do. I think the thing is, we've acted as if we can't have expectations and accountability for young students, without realizing that structure is critical to kids at a young age to be able to have behavior management. And you don't have to have structure with aggression, but you can have clear expectations and boundaries for students and implement those and have good discipline. But that also requires your principal and your administration to buy into that structure, to buy into that, to support you in those boundaries. And I don't think that's something that we've had. And I think if we can change that structure of the support of teachers who are having classroom management, of teachers who are sending students to the principal, and then they're coming back and then they feel like, why am I doing this then? Nothing's happening. I think if you change that, you'll see discipline improve in Lynchburg City Schools.
Vice Mayor Frivaldi?
What is the greatest threat to Lynchburg City Schools?
Thank you. The greatest threat is the lack of follow-through and preparation. Lynchburg City Schools, it looks great. All the programs that Dr. Wilder was talking about earlier, gifted, restorative, all of these. Peel back the layers though, and let's look into the actual things that are going into those programs. What data are we actually evaluating to see if they're successful? Like, I FOIA'd a lot, I can't find it. Like, I've looked into it. And as an engineer, as someone who knows that programs are not just stagnant, they need to be iterative. You need to be constantly evaluating their success so that you can change them and tweak them as you develop, as times change, as everything progresses, so that they're actually impactful still, so that they're not a waste of money and time and energy. This entire year, we've heard the council call for fiscal responsibility. We've heard the school board and administration, I would say more use it as a buzzword and not actually as something that they really focused on, because when people have presented situations and solutions that could help long-term with fiscal responsibility, they have been written off. When people, myself, have presented a relationship with institutions like the Education Rights Institute at the University of Virginia that focuses specifically on the legal part of education policy and how do you help school districts be efficient, have the best practices for urban school districts, have the best programs to do this. You need to bring those people in who are experts in this area who can tell you which programs are the best for students who are in Lynchburg. Instead of saying, well, this is a buzzword program right now. It looks really good for us to check off a box and say that we have this without any really thorough plans with it, and then also the pressure of producing results because it is a buzzword program or is revolutionary or is XYZ. Well, let's look at the implementation, and they have not been as successful as they have been presented as, because there's the expectation that there is success when it's been mediocre. And so I think the follow-through has not been there. Follow-through was not there for the goals for the next 5 years. If you look at their benchmarks that they had, which ones have they met? Nothing has been followed through. We have innovation that excites, but how is that innovation actually exciting anything in the classroom? So I think the follow-through and the planning is the biggest threat, because if we look at this next year, rezoning, closing schools, all of this, again, I'll say we're at a critical juncture and it will be catastrophic if we don't have follow-through now.
Thank you. Well, we're almost out of time. I want to say, listening to you speak, I feel like I just saw an engineer's brain just all behind you. It's like math problems all behind your head, but in words, with all of your thinking. And so it's impressive just with how much information and knowledge that you have, and obviously research you've done. And I appreciate a lot of the things that you said about just some, a lot of the stuff that you referenced are state standard issues too as well that I think need to be addressed also, that just trickle down into the local school levels. I encourage you, if you haven't become familiar with the Virginia Literacy Act that is going to be implemented, and a lot of that will be new textbooks that'll be kind of more current to your concerns earlier, and the way that the students will be being taught, which hopefully will improve some of the literacy concerns that I think you and I both have. But thank you so much for your time and coming out here today. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. And I know I talked and rambled some. If you have any questions that you weren't able to ask me, feel free to just reach out and I can respond to them there.
Okay.
But
thank you so much. All right, next up we have Brandy Gibbs. Hello, Ms. Gibbs. If you would like to take a minute or two to introduce yourself and let us know why you should be considered for school board.
I'm Brandy Gibbs. I've lived in the city for almost 20 years. I'm raising 3 children. Their ages are 9, 7, and 18 months. In the last year, I opened my own business. I do property management in downtown Lynchburg. I was an assistant project manager on the Virginian Hotel. I love the city, and I think the schools have a big problem. I've got experience in working in a multi-million-dollar international company, a defense contractor here in town, and then I've got most of my experience as a small business. So I'm very familiar with the town, and I have family members that are educators out in Bedford County, Campbell County, Amherst County, and so I've got a little door into the window of education, and think that with what my knowledge is, I can probably help the broken system that exists currently.
Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you so much for coming in today and offering your services for our school board and our community and our children. We appreciate that. The school system has a plethora of programs for learning loss, for accelerating students like the GO Center, various other achievement gap programs to help our kids with achievement gap situations. So we've seen some programs, some success, some not as strong as a success. What program do you like the best that you've seen be most successful in our school system? And what do you see as lacking to address like learning loss or achievement gap challenges in an urban school setting?
So learning loss, I'm going to start with that one. That's a big problem. That's the number one thing that I hear from my siblings that are educators. And I think that you're going to need a really strong tutoring system, maybe an aftercare system where you've got teachers who are very passionate about what they do and who care about getting the students up to speed. In terms of the favorite program, my daughter was in daycare during COVID, and they did put a mask on her, which caused a speech delay. And so I worked with the city to have her speech evaluated and then have a plan to bring her back up to where she needed to be. And we did that program through the Hutcherson Early Learning Center. They did a fantastic job. There was a young man who worked there from the University of Lynchburg, and he was hands-on. His boss was perfect, and my daughter is now excelling in kindergarten.
Great, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I really have no questions for Ms. Gibbs. Her social media post tells me everything I need to know to make a responsible decision. Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Gibbs.
Good morning.
As I'm reading on your application, you have a desire to bring the standards and quality of our education in the schools back to acceptable levels. And I realize that candidates over the years of 20 years that I haven't maybe agreed with, but we get information from everybody in every perspective. And so I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate another person that says we need to bring back the main thing, education, back to acceptable levels. How would we do that? How would you help do that with the school board?
Well, I think where we start is on a fiscal level, where we start using the money that hardworking taxpayers in the city are paying to have the schools open. I think we start there and do an efficient and wise budget for how to run the schools. And then beyond that, I agree with the former interviewee. We need quality educators in the city, and we're losing them right and left. My siblings would never teach in the city. They're having their own discipline problems out in the counties, and they're concerned about the behavior in the classroom and the safety of the classrooms. So I think that our focus needs to be put there.
And I'll follow up on that one too. Yeah, I've heard from lots of teachers as well in the city where a student was misbehaving, and then they give them a lollipop. And the teachers are like, wait a minute, what's happening here? I think the school board is looking at some new policies, even as soon as next week, adopting, I think, a little more stricter control and a little more, so would you be for more control by the teachers in the schoolroom to keep things?
Absolutely. I do think the teachers are better at mentoring and shaping the students than the administration. It does feel like there's an out-of-touch situation where the principals and the vice principals are not backing up our teachers. Absolutely.
Great, thank you so much.
Councilman Missions?
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for coming. So I'm going to kind of dial in on something you spoke about earlier. You talked about the experience you had with your daughter and the mask, right? So we take an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of Virginia. School board takes that same oath. So what we don't take is an oath to subservience to the federal government or the state government and so forth. So with that being said, the masking, right? If we ever come across a situation like that, where we've got a higher authority that's saying, do this, right? But you feel like that decision is morally wrong, unacceptable. Can you tell me, one, would you defy that decision? Would you support defying that decision? And how would you go about pushing back?
I'd absolutely defy it. I talked to Dr. Gupta recently about this. Defy it as much as I possibly can. I would try to get as many other school boards on board with that decision. I would start knocking on doors. It's how passionately I feel. I spent thousands of dollars on that speech therapy, and I had to do a redshirt year of kindergarten for my daughter because she could not get there the first year. Second year went great. But I would talk to parents, because parents are the ones who need to be making the decisions for their children, not people on school board or city council. It's the parents' job, not anyone else.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilman Taylor?
Parent to teacher discipline.
You don't have to say much more. I do think that parents need to be listening to the teachers. I run into that a lot with my siblings. They get really frustrated when parents want to argue, my child didn't do that, and who's in the classroom, you or the teacher? So I have a major problem with parents trying to run the way that the teachers want to run the classrooms.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ferraldo?
I'd appreciate yes or no responses to these questions. Do you think the decision to force masks on children during COVID was appropriate?
No.
If school board members voted to mask your children without your approval, does that disqualify their candidacy to serve on the school board?
Yes.
If a member of council voted to appoint all 3 school board members who voted to mask your children during COVID, was that a wrong vote?
It was absolutely wrong.
Thank you. So do you think Jeff Helgeson was out of line in appointing those 3 school board members?
If that's the decision he made, then yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Gibbs. I have a question for you. I'll say this, that I've never met you before, and I'll say that out of all the candidates so far that we've had, whose names are on the list for interviews, I have had the most emails or calls or concerns about you so far. I thought I recognized your name, so I had to kind of think back. And then I remembered seeing a social media post back in the fall. So I want to confirm that it's you before I go any further. Did you go by Brandy Gibbs George on social media?
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you recall doing a post back in October where you were wearing a Glenn Youngkin t-shirt and you were expressing your frustration about the vice mayor and a citizen named Kathleen Davis?
Absolutely, I remember that post. That was me.
Okay, I have no further questions. Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you. Given the current climate with our school board and city council, I've served on the school board for 9 years and city council 8. The challenges have been back and forth. What can you bring to bring unity to our school board and our school system? And even getting reference to the getting a lot of subject about the masking piece. I work with young kids. We have an urban school setting, so you have kids from all parts of our community. And one child I work with currently, he gave COVID to his father, and the father died. And then the kid is still in mental therapy because of he's feeling guilty about that. So when you have an urban school setting and kids from all over, addressing that is really challenging. So how do you want to address it being an urban school setting, and how do you bring more unity to our city council, our school board, considering it's an urban school setting?
Well, I grew up lower middle class out in Pamplin City. I don't know if you've heard of it. So I'm quite familiar with people in lower social economic classes. Thankfully, I had parents who cared, and I grew up in a very safe environment. And I grew up in the private school system until I moved to the area. I was then transferred to the public school system. And I think that we all need to put politics aside and focus on what's important, which is the kids and families. And no child can succeed without their family support. So if we need to help you guys implement something that helps the families that are in these urban settings that don't have the family support that I was given, I would absolutely help support that. And I do think that there are groups in our urban cities that are doing that work. But I think that the work starts at home, and when we're in these meetings, we need to put the politics aside and focus on the children and the curriculum and supporting our teachers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No question.
Thank you. Well, I'll follow up since everybody's, it's interesting how city council appoints school boards. And what we do is, as we make these appointments, it takes a majority. Normally we talk about them privately, and somebody gets 4 votes. We usually all unanimously say, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Back when COVID happened, and when the masks were there, and now it's a case in point, your child about phonics, I was very vocal on that. It wasn't just vocal with words. I think the only council member sitting behind this dais that said, I'm not going to kowtow and put on some mask for some order that wasn't a legitimate order. I mean, we have a constitution that has the legislative branch that has to write law. So when the executive branch just says by fiat, here's what we're going to do, talked about why this was going to be so bad from a learning loss, why these masks were going to be so bad for young children learning phonics when you can't even see their mouths and faces, knowing exactly what's going to happen, saying it ahead of time. Then once it happens, now people looking in hindsight saying, oh, that was bad. How can we make sure that we have people that think, that are mature, that can make good decisions, thinking about the future, rather than just, attacking somebody in the rearview mirror? How can we do that? How do you make decisions?
I think that you have conversations with people. You don't scream on social media. You go and talk to people. You talk about why you care about running for school board, because we've got a problem in the city with the city schools. I think it's just having conversations with people, and I don't care if you agree with my politics or not. I don't care if you like my Instagram or not. You have to talk to people, and you have to find a common ground. That's what adults do. We find a way to get along. We find a way to negotiate. We don't just chitter chatter behind each other's backs like middle schoolers. I think that's what you do. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Missions?
Thank you. Kind of torn here because there's the route that I want to go, but I don't think I'm going to go that route. Let's talk about charter schools. How do you feel about charter schools and driving more choice and control over choice for parents?
I do agree with it. I like charter schools. I agree with the previous interviewee who said that she does not want to see resources diverted from other schools into the charter schools. I think that there's a way that it can be done effectively without taking away from the kids who are not going to be in the charter schools. But that is something that I would support and get behind if it were put on the table.
Got it, thank you.
Nothing, I'm good.
I'm good. Dr. Walden? Any other questions?
Thank you for your willingness to come forward and
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Gupta, you're not scheduled till 11:30. If you want to come early and go ahead and start.
Madam Mayor, we should probably still have a hard stop at 11:45 then, to be fair to other candidates.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll still have a 30-minute time limit, of course. If you'd like to take a minute or two and let us know why you'd like to be reconsidered for an additional term on school board, go ahead.
You know, I've lived in this community for 27 years. I came to United States 34 years ago with a suitcase and a couple of $100. So I have seen the value of education in my own life. So it is a giving back to the society. That's where I took over this responsibility, and every day I have learned new things. As you know, you go from one job to next job to next job, and every time in next step you learn new things. And this school board has been an eye-opener for me. From being a school board member now to be chair, you learn how to navigate and how to do what is good for those kid. Because many times in all this culture war, the kid gets lost. And my focus has been and will always be kids first, then the employees, and then rest comes afterwards. So I'm here, and if given an opportunity, it'll be an honor to serve for next 3 more years on the Lynchburg City School Board.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Wilder?
Yes, thank you for your willingness to serve, and thank you for your passion for serving in our community for the past 6 years in our school board. We appreciate that. Given Lynchburg School System has a plethora of programs for learning loss, achievement gap, and various other programs, the Gold Center and things of that nature, what program do you think is making the most impact in our children? And consider we still have some achievement gap problems as well as some SOL challenges. What do you like to see more done in our school system to address that? Thank you.
I cannot pick one program or the other in my current role, but you know, they're all wonderful. Means you talk about from Governor's School, that's the prime program we have, to dual degree programs, to Petal program, to Hutcherson Learning Center. I can go on and on in terms of the programs we have, the CTE program. So it's just the utilization. We need to up it a little bit, and I don't want to do a Monday morning quarterback here and criticize them. But we got to do a little bit more to involve students. So coming back to the achievement gap part of it, the reading level, if you look at the SOL scores, if you take Paul Monroe out, which is 94% for 5th graders, if you take Deerington out, which is 82%, rest are in 50s. So we got to do a better job so that every child, so my definition of achievement gap and the administration is slightly different. To me, if you are a 5th grader, irrespective of your race, color, religion, if you are not able to read at 5th grade, we have an achievement gap. And we as a school district has a responsibility to patch up that achievement gap. And as I said during my 3 minutes of presentation before, the focus next year needs to be in academics. This year, the focus was on fixing the discipline issues. You got to create a learning environment where you can truly work on reducing that gap. And reading, writing, and math are the 3 core things. If you're falling behind up to grade 5, nothing is going to happen. Councilman, Vice Mayor, for all the points of graduation rate, we are at 80%. On average, Commonwealth of Virginia is 90%. I can go on and, you know what I'm saying? But it's just, we have to do, and I think we're working towards that to reduce achievement gap. We have a literacy plan which will be presented to the board tomorrow. And hoping by that implementing the plan will be a 1 step forward in terms of reducing that much-needed achievement gap, because the kids should be able to read, write, and do math up to that level they are in. Nobody should be left behind.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Dolan?
Thank you. Thank you for your service in the past. What decision have you made as a school board member that you're most proud of, and what decision have you made that you regret?
So when I came on the school board, I found out minimum wage was $10 an hour. And you ask Dr. Edwards, he'll tell you, I asked what is the living wage at that time in the United States. It was about $11.50. So to me, in that budget year, I spent all my energy to making sure that we have a living wage for our employees. And I'm very proud that we were able to achieve that in that year. And now the minimum wage for an hourly employee at Lynchburg City Schools is $15. And I'm not proud that this year I thought we'll be able to do $17 an hour and $50,000 minimum for our teachers. Last year we were able to reach $47 for our teachers. This year the goal was $50. So I think I failed in my effort to reach that $17 an hour goal this year and to reach that $50,000. That's from I'm assuming you're looking from the operational point of view or from the academic. The achievement gap has still persists. In terms of decisions, there's a lot of decisions made, and no decision brings flowers our way. There's always criticism no matter what you do. Are you looking for a specific decision?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Thank you, I got it.
Councilman Helgeson?
Well, good morning. And it's, it's interesting because I think you first applied for the school board. I remember Mike Gillette was on city council, so it's been a lot of years. And with that, we do straw polls and whatnot to say who we want. And I pushed for you for a lot of years. And the majority said no. So it's sad that we couldn't put you on sooner, but very glad that we were able to appoint you 6 years ago. And I think it was at a time that the school enrollment kept declining, the test scores declined. I think this was a time shortly after where the school administration illegally overspent their budget. And at that time, even though I was the only Republican, or one of the few Republicans on council, we said, we need to make a change. I like Dr. Gupta because he's one that will think. You mentioned as well that kids first. I've interviewed, so all I'm saying is I've interviewed you numerous times over all these years. When you say kids first, that isn't just, a catchphrase, but because I remember when there was a shooting, you called me and said, Councilman Helgeson, can you meet me at Heritage Elementary School and welcome these kids? And we sat out there welcoming the kids for an hour and a half. I remember when there's a flood at EC Glass, you called and said, Councilman Helgeson, can you meet me there so we can, you were there. And encouraging others to come and see. So when you say kids first, it's not a slogan or a catchphrase. So I appreciate, and your last comment about nobody ever loves your decisions. I mean, there's always somebody happy, somebody sad. So I appreciate the fact of that next year with the school board, you're going to be looking at discipline. Give me some ideas what you're thinking about doing with regarding tightening up discipline.
Let me give a disclaimer before. I don't want to feel that I have a hotline with Councilman Helgeson and everybody else is left out.
Oh, no, I think
When we had a flooding, I called everybody in the city.
Yeah,
council,
absolutely.
including city manager.
Yep.
And later on, I was told not to bring city council to everything which happened. But I thought, I'm a true believer that everybody needs to be involved.
And I'm your
and,
council
and not
representative in
left
Ward
out.
3. Yep.
So that day, the phone call from me went out to everybody in the city and the school board to make sure that everybody is aware that we got the kids to take care of, the buildings need to be taken care of, and we do it as a community. We do it together as a team, irrespective of what our political, social beliefs are. And that's one thing I have done in the last 3-4 years is to look at both sides of me and say, how do I bring both parties together? As you know, city council is all about, you got to have four votes to move anything forward. In school board, you got to have 5 votes to move anything forward. But disagreements apart, I've always tell all my team means my all school board members, that we got to keep the child into our focus. That's the key focus. You may bring your personal belief, we leave them at the door, and we keep that child, because many of those kids don't have anybody to speak up for them. And we, as school administration and school board, have the moral and legal responsibility to take care of them. And I do visit schools frequently. I do show up at those schools, and that's not a slogan. I quietly do it. But doesn't mean for a show and tell or to take pictures, to make sure that things are running the way they should be. And when I became the school board chair, I worked with Dr. Edwards to have agenda prep meetings at schools. So she and I can walk through the schools and meet the teachers and see the school, right? So agenda prep meetings are now done at different schools. So that gives her and me an opportunity to walk through a school together. So things have been done privately, quietly, to make sure that we have a pulse of the district on a day-to-day basis. Because this is a huge district. You got about 7,000 plus students, 1,500 employees to take care of, and the community. Because anything goes wrong, they call you and they email you, and you got to make sure that they are heard. So child and the community is very important, and they need to be taken care of. I have learned, and I'm older in last 6 years. I always believe there's too much negativity in the world. So last convocation, I told teachers, please don't be a problem finder, be a solution provider. I can sit here and give you 20 negative things which is wrong about me. Look at me, I don't even have a tie, I cannot afford, my shoes don't have socks, my shoes are not polished, you know. So I can go on and say, this Gupta guy, he looks ugly, he shouldn't be sitting in front of all these people with tie and coat. You see what I'm saying? But the positivity is, I come with a value, with a humility to serve the district, so.
Thank you.
Councilman Mischins?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your last 6 years of service, and thank you for stepping up to do it again. What's your goal over the next 3 years?
So as I said, this year, as a lot of policies will come to the school board tomorrow, which we are voting on. So I'll give you a few examples. The agenda is public, so I'm not disclosing anything which is not public. Right now, if a teacher sends a student back to the principal's office, they can be sent back right into the classroom. So there'll be a 48-hour cooling off period in that when the student, so there's the classroom environment is not disturbed. If you put our hands on our teacher, there'll be an expulsion, but you go through the due process. So there's a lot of, when I became a chair, I appointed, a board chair has, the policy allows board chair to appoint special committees. So I appointed an ad hoc committee on discipline to look at all the discipline policies. See what we can do to create an environment which is conducive to learning. That's the bottom line. Because if the environment is not there, I can be doing achievement gap, like I've been doing with Dr. Coleman for the last 5-6 years. The needle doesn't move. So tomorrow, high school graduation, valedictorians, salutatorians are not right now allowed to speak at graduation. That policy will change tomorrow. So a lot of things we are doing tomorrow, which will basically have an impact on the learning environment and our Lynchburg City Schools District. Because when I moved to Lynchburg, we were top 100 high school in the United States. We are not anymore. We are basically, our AP courses are 20% enrollment. And I have asked again and again, why don't we register? So we have added some courses in last 1 year to have more. So I was told that 300 students registered last year. The data is not out. So as we do more registration in AP courses, that ranking will come by itself. So we got to do things intentionally to make sure, saying we don't have 100 ranking in top 100 is wonderful, then what are we doing about that? So AP course registration is one of those things we'll be pushing. We pushed last year and we're pushing higher next year. So that 20% should go about 40-50%, and that'll give us that ranking. So in terms of goal, next year will be focused on learning, reading, writing, and math. Academics, academics, academics. All that drama will be behind us. Learning environment will be conducive to learning, and the classroom teacher. We have dedicated teachers. It breaks my heart. Some of those teachers are retiring this year with 39 years of experience. They have given their lives to the school district. And so next year, goal is lifting the academics, and God knows after that year means I can go 1 year at a time, because the things change. The ecosystem and the environment, as you know, changes rapidly. So, but next year goal will be academics, academics, academics. We got to bring focus back on learning in the classroom and outside the classroom. A lot of things city is doing to get these kids involved so that they don't get into the goofy things outside the classroom. I always said, I wish we had more Jubilee centers in the city of Lynchburg so we can get these kids engaged after the classroom. And so the funding to the governor is coming from certain, tutoring programs and other things. It's very focused funding. We got to utilize that, and utilize that with a assessment in the end, so we can measure what we are doing and is it having an impact or not. Is that?
Thank you.
Dr. Gupta, praise God, good to see you. High school diplomas versus certificates of completion. The certificate of completion is just for seats filled, or do these kids, that certificate of completion equals the diploma that they get from Heritage and EC Glass?
So high school diploma, I understand it's important, but you got to be learning something on the way, because not everybody goes to a 4-year degree. I used to teach in Austria in my previous life, and the Austrian and German schools, they don't have 4-year degree program. They all go into what we call trade schools. They learn skills, and then later on in their life, when they're married, they got kids, then they come back to complete 4-year degrees. And our economy has become a skill-based economy, an economy which cherishes, if you are a CNA or a med aid, you make more money than a 4-year kid will make. So we got to increase the CTE program. Our enrollments have trickled down. I have not seen the 23-24 data yet, so I don't want to be a problem finder there. But I think we got to build up those CTE program in collaboration with CVCC and local universities to make sure the numbers are higher, because the graduation rate is 100% for CTE students. Henrico County has 98% graduation for CTE programs, where Lynchburg City Schools has 100% graduation for CTE programs. So we do better than other localities in Virginia when our students are enrolled in CTE. So there must be something good happening there, which is camaraderie and in a cohesiveness where they say, this kid is doing good, I gotta do it better. And the same thing like Jubilee does, they brings this kid together, and they have peers to look up to and saying, this is good thing is happening and I got to replicate that. So a diploma itself is not sufficient. It needs to be supplemented, not complemented, but supplemented with other programs.
What I said was certificate of completion
Okay.
versus diploma.
Yeah, but diploma is needed for anything else you need to do life. Certificate of completion will not meet the checkbox for any further education they want to go.
Dr. Gupta, as you know, there are many, many issues for Lynchburg City Schools. Declining enrollment, as was mentioned, school closures, pay discrepancies, achievement gaps, facilities, you name it, that the challenges go on and on and on. Why, with these issues, should we continue with your service on the school board?
It's a selfish answer I'll be giving you, because to me, if you look at the average tenure on the school board, if you take all the 3 school board members out this year, will be 1.5 years. It means there are 3 board members with just 2-year term on the school board, and 3 members with just 1-year term on the school board. And the knowledge of the district is very important to run the district. So I bring, my value proposition is I bring value in terms of understanding the district and understanding in terms of the management of it. And management doesn't happen overnight. It's a 18-wheeler, where if you make a fast turn, it will overturn. So the change happens, but change has to be incremental. and has to be slow change. So in last 1 year of my tenure, the change has happened. And as I said, the more change, and all that change is focused towards making sure that we are able to lift those reading, writing, and math, reduce the achievement gap. So my value proposition to you will be that you can hold me to my words that the achievement gap of all students will decrease next year if I'm reappointed.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Good to see you. So you're the only school board member that we're interviewing, or, that's still sitting on the board. So you have a unique perspective for us. So I'm going to ask you this question. What strengths do you feel are most needed on the school board for us to consider of the other candidates that we're interviewing? If you could guide, if you were going to guide us in, not in a specific person, but the strengths do you think are most important for us to be considering of all the people that we're interviewing? What would you say are most needed?
See, when I came first time for my interview for school board, I thought I knew it all, and nobody knows anything better than me. Now what I have learned is I don't know anything, and everybody around me knows better than I do. So a level of, as our hair gets grayer and grayer, our blood gets colder and colder, we are a lot more mature, you don't get upset right away. It takes time to trigger your buttons to get angry. So first strength is to be able to understand the school system, because you're dealing with different personalities. Just saying, fire this person, I can fire that person, doesn't yield anything good. You got to bring some positivity to the table. And so the biggest strength they'll need is an ability, capability, and willingness to learn. Because learning the school system is like you're running a huge brand new corporation. It has budget, academics, and personnel, right? And as a school board's role is only to set policies. Superintendent runs the district on a day-to-day basis. So people tell me why my bus has not arrived. That's not my lane. I can call the superintendent and say why bus has not arrived. But I can set the policies in terms of informing the school board when the buses are late by more than 5 minutes. You see what I'm saying? Then the superintendent has to go by that policy to make sure that the board is aware of that. So to give you an example, I'm going on a tangent right now, because last year we changed the policies. The contract of the superintendent says the accountability based on policies, but we were using norms and protocols. So if there's any dispute, there's no norms and protocols in the contract. So we incorporated all those norms and protocols into policies. So somebody to understand a 30,000 view of this organization is very, very important. Because otherwise, for the last 5 years, if you keep doing it norms and protocols and there's a contractual dispute, then the district has no legal standing in any court. So a complete view of the organization is very important. And that view comes from taking a time, taking a deep breath, and trying to understand what is going on. And people need to understand school board is a full-time job. You cannot miss meetings or not show up or just call abstain for every vote which comes your way. If you are there, you got to vote yes or no. People are watching. You're role models for these kids. Right? If you cannot make tough decisions, this is not a field for you. Because as I said, tough decisions with only one person in point, that's the little kid you have who cannot speak for themselves. So as long as you got the best interest of the child, one should be able to make tough decisions for the good of this community and good of this district. And so I personally stay away from negativity. So many times you'll see me, I'll close my eyes, go into meditation mode when too much negativity is coming. Because I've come through those iterations myself, where it's easy to get wrapped around into negative things around you. And so I would look for people who are positive, people who want to truly make a difference in the school district. Saying and doing is completely different things. Because you got a lot of schools in the school district, a lot of teachers, a lot of students with different viewpoints. And an understanding of the finances, because we have the biggest challenge we are facing right now. I got 59 teachers who have resigned in the last 2 months or leaving the school district. We have 0 nominations. So it's understanding I call it the weeds of the organization too, 30,000 view to 0% view. So my fear going into August is, and I asked the superintendent, what are we planning to do? Because to me, if those 59 positions are not filled, something needs to be done. So, there are short-term, long-term, as I said, these are moving parts. Somebody who is a good communicator, I'll give you an example. I started calling at 7:30 this morning. And I called a school board member who is on a vacation at beach, but he picked up my phone because there was something important I needed to communicate with him. So it's very important to have an open line of communication, which is, people say communication, but when it comes to you, they don't pick up your phone, they don't reply to your text messages, right? They don't check their emails. Here in the district, you gotta check your email every day. If you don't check it, then you fall behind. And then you wake up when the policy is passed and it's being implemented, and you wonder what happened. Why are we doing this? Because that was discussed 4 weeks ago. The train has left 3 more stations after that. So, being active on a daily basis, that's why I said it's more than a full-time job. It's something which involves you on a day-to-day basis. But if you're sleeping on the wheel, then the district fall apart. So you got to be, if you're a school board member and you're truly monitoring, because our job is policy development and policy implementation. So that's another very important thing, is to have active, agile communication.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have 3 minutes left, so Dr. Wilder, I'll give you the last question.
No questions.
Councilwoman Dolan?
I just have one question, and it has to do, given your relationship with UES, Inc., the University Educational Services, do you feel that you can fairly and impartially represent this community going forward?
Yes, I have always been impartial in all my decision-making, and I think people work for different companies, and those things are out the door when you walk into the school board. So those are 2 different islands.
Thank you.
Councilman Hugginson?
Yeah, we've all seen Dr. Gupta's 6 years. He is, as the mayor just stated, he's the only candidate. So I would ask that unanimous consent, we appoint Dr. Gupta for just District 3, since there is no others on this one.
Vice Mayor Foley?
I would submit respectfully that such a motion would be out of order, considering that this is a special meeting for a specific purpose, and we would have to wait till the next meeting.
I guess with that, since all members are present, we can suspend the rules to say, yes, we're going to appoint, if so chose. To suspend the rules, since Dr. Gupta is here before us today, all 7 members are present.
I suppose what I would submit is it doesn't sound like there's unanimous consent to do that. So, and that being said, I don't think it hurts anything to wait to the next regular meeting where everyone else is present and where it's set to be voted on.
Yeah, and Madam Mayor,
Vice Mayor?
I would also submit, I don't mean to be a stickler in the mud, but, if it's not on the agenda that we're going to be voting on who's going to be appointed or not, let's do it right, let's do it all at the same time, and do it as advertised.
I guess just the only point is the fact that he is the only one, as stated by the mayor, and we all know that he's the only candidate that is in there, but, so I thought we could make one thing a little easier, because the train's leaving the station. There are problems coming up with August, as far as, it's nice to know that the conductor is still on the station, so that's why I just thought it'd be great to do it as soon as possible.
Fair point, but I guess without unanimous consent, then we'll just go ahead and leave it as is, but thank you for your point. With that said, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Our next meeting will be held Tuesday, June 25th, 2024 at 4 p.m. here in Council Chamber.